morning. This is Randall McCoy, My Life. Take one. Okay, Randall, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I reckon I can. I can do that.
Okay, when were you born, sir?
I was born the 30th day of October, 1825. And there's no need to call me sir. Just Randall will be fine.
Okay, thank you. Who were your parents?
My parents were Daniel and Margaret McCoy.
Okay, how many children were in your family?
There were 13 of us. I was the fourth born.
Wow, a lot of kiddos. How many of your siblings served in the Civil War?
There were 7 of us that served in the war between the states. There was John, myself, Asa Harmon, Samuel, Thomas Palmer, James, and William or Billy.
Wow, that was a lot of your brothers in the war. Can you tell us more about them?
Well, probably the more famous one, more well-known would be Asa Harmon.
Okay.
Asa Harmon, he belonged to the United States Army. He was Union. He was killed by bushwhackers on January the 7th, 1865, after he'd been mustered out of the service the previous month, December the 24th, 1864. By bushwhackers, I mean Devil Anse Hatfield, Crazy Jim Vance, and the Hatfield gang of West Virginia.
Okay.
John, another brother, he joined the 39th Kentucky Infantry. He was also a Union soldier. He was captured in 1863 and taken prisoner in Virginia. He was transferred to Annapolis General Hospital 6th day of April 1863, where he died. He died of anascarsa, was cause of his death, which was a condition of swelling usually caused by severe infection.
That sounded painful.
Then there was Samuel. Samuel belonged to the 5th Kentucky Regiment of Confederate States Army. He was a Confederate soldier. On the muster roll, it just says he died of a disease in 1862 while in the Confederate States Army. He had also been taken POW. Samuel's son, Sam Jr., known as Big Sam or Squirrel Hunting Sam, he was well known during the feud years, but that was his son.
Okay.
Then my other brother, William Pleasant McCoy, or everybody called him Billy. Billy belonged to the 39th Kentucky Regiment, United States Army. He was in the Union also. William and his family, he got out of the Civil War. He made it through it and he moved to Missouri from Pike County. About 2 years prior to his death, he was struck by lightning while he was out cutting firewood.
My goodness.
Yeah. And then Thomas Palmer. Thomas was in the 36th. I named one of my sons after Palmer. He was in the 36th Regiment, Virginia Infantry, Confederate States Army. Born and captured in Virginia during the war. He served from 61 to 65. You know, the 36th is what was known as the Wildcats. He was, unlike some other people that claim to have been a member of the 36th or in the Wildcats, he actually was.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Then there was James. James was also in the 36th Regiment Virginia Infantry, Confederate States Army. And he signed up when he was 17 years old.
Wow.
The 3rd of July, 1861, in Logan County, Virginia. And he was also injured twice during the war. But that's my brothers. There was 7 of us that actually served.
Wow, interesting.
During the war.
Okay. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I do want to come back to the Civil War in a bit and cover it more intensely.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Okay, can you tell me about your childhood?
Yeah, I had a good childhood. Good as any, I guess. My family were farmers. So we grew our own food and raised our own livestock. We hunted and fished, all the things you do in order to survive back in that day. My pa and ma were good, hard-working people. They raised 13 of us children, you know.
Wow. At what age did you marry Sarah?
Me and Sarah got married in 1849. I was 24 years old, and Sarah, she was 20 years old.
Wow. Okay, is that when you and Sarah set up homestead in Blackberry Fort?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so everything was going good, and then along came the Civil War. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, up until that point, you hadn't had any problems getting along with your neighbors, have you?
Oh, mercy, no. We got along with everyone up until the war between the states started.
I see. Okay, did the war divide a lot of families and neighbors?
Oh, for sure it did. A lot of hard, hurt, and bitter feelings during that time came from that war.
I could see that. I understand that. Okay, what made you decide to join the CSA side?
Well, I thought about it long and hard.
Okay.
I had friends and family on both sides. My reason for joining the South was I just didn't think it right for the federal government to tell the states what we had to do and how we had to live.
Okay, and did you own any slaves during that time?
Oh, Lord, no. No, I never owned a slave, nor did I want to. We were well-bodied people. We did our own work. We never thought it right that one man should own another man.
I agree. Okay, some people think the Civil War was more about slavery than anything else. Is that correct?
That's not correct.
Okay.
No, ma'am. The war between the states was about being free states to govern ourselves and being free from taxes and federal overseers.
Okay, Randall, let's talk about you and William Anderson Hatfield and what happened to cause all the animosity and hard feelings between the two of you and your families.
I'd rather not talk about it,
Okay.
but I will
Okay.
because many have said over the years that because I didn't talk back in the day is the reason all the lies and wrong stories got told. So I guess I should try to straighten it out if I can.
I'm sure people would appreciate that. Okay, when did you and Anderson Hatfield first meet?
Oh, honey, I couldn't tell you that. But it was way back when we were younger, way before the war.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you just knew each other in passing?
Yes, just in passing. Aunts lived on the Virginia side of the river, and my family mostly lived on the Kentucky side of the river.
Okay, and I assume you're talking about the Tug River?
Yes, that's correct. The Tug River. It separates the two states. Only now it's West Virginia, as Virginia split in 1863, and they created another state called West Virginia.
Okay. Were you two ever friends before the war?
Well, I guess we were friends. I knew him and he knew me. We had never had a falling out, if that's what you're asking. But we never visited one another or hunted together or nothing like that.
Okay, interesting. Okay, before the war, you and aunts never had any kind of falling out or disagreement?
No, ma'am. Not one bitter word from one to another.
Okay, let's get right to the meat and potatoes of just what caused you to become bitter enemies.
I don't reckon I'd call it bitter enemies in the beginning as much as I would hard feelings.
Okay. Well, what caused the hard feelings?
Well, me and my brother-in-law, Sarah's brother, Uriah McCoy, had first joined the Virginia State Line Infantry in 1861, almost at the start of the war between the states. It wasn't long after that, the fall of 1862, that the Virginia State Line would be dismantled or transformed into the CSA 45th Battalion. It consisted of many men that had been in the Virginia State Line before. By now the war was well underway.
How old were you when you joined the CSA?
I was right at 40 years old, give or take a year or two.
Who else was in the CSA 45th Battalion?
Oh Lord, there was several. Uriah McCoy, Selkirk McCoy. There were several McCoys, and at the time several Hatfields from the Virginia side of the river had joined the 45th.
Did Anderson Hatfield join the 45th at that time?
Yeah, he joined up in the fall of 62. Several members of his family joined the 45th.
And what happened next?
Well, we had a few skirmishes here and there, mostly with the Kentucky 39th in Pikeville. Then as the Union came more easterly from Pikeville towards the Virginia line, we began to have the battles on Pond Creek. It was during one of those conflicts around January or February 1863 that Ants and several of the Hatfields decided to desert. And when they deserted, it left us all alone by ourselves in the heat of battle.
Are you saying Anderson Hatfield and others fled the unit while it was in an active fighting situation?
That's exactly what I'm saying. He and approximately 13 others deserted their post, leaving us short-handed. Several of our men were slaughtered, and what was not killed were taken POWs and held for days for transfer to other POW camps.
So that's when the hard feelings between you and Anderson Hatfield started?
Yes, ma'am. That's when the hard feelings started.
Okay, did he give you any logical reason why he was going to desert and take the others with him?
Oh, there was no time for logical reasoning or talking.
Okay.
Most of us were busy fighting, trying to stay alive. We got in fear of our lives. I guess most of us were in fear of their lives as well. But we couldn't up and run and leave the others. I guess the only way to say it is as Randall McCoy said, Ants cowered in and run like a banny rooster. Ants was a big talker for such a small guy, but turns out he was all talk when it came to standing on line and fighting it out.
Okay, so I'm going to change the subject just a little bit. I've noticed you referred to him as Ants or Anderson. Why do some people call him Devil Ants?
Well, the way I always heard and what he told the men in the 45th while we be sitting around the fire, that was before he deserted, was that his ma gave him that name because he was always pestering her and being mischievous as a child. She told him he was meaner than the devil, and he liked that name, I guess.
What happened after you and the rest of the men who wasn't killed were captured after Devil Ants Anderson left?
Well, Uriah had taken a bullet and he was injured. They did give him medical treatment. The rest of us were held for a time and then sent to Camp Chase, Ohio. From there, we were sent to Camp Douglas, Illinois, where I stayed for the next 2.5 years.
Okay, tell us about the conditions. Were they bad at Camp Douglas, Illinois?
I'm sorry, dear. I was just trying to get my breath.
That's okay. Take your time.
My. I couldn't believe to tell. I couldn't begin to tell you of what the men went through there. It was pure hell.
I'm sure it was.
Nothing to eat, and what we did eat was usually rotten. No covers, no clothes, but what we had on our backs when we were taking POW. Horrible conditions.
I'd say it was. Some have said they thought being a POW for such a long time and the conditions that you were in affected you. Do you think that's true?
Of course, I think that's a fair statement. I think it affected every POW. I think it affected anybody that was in a POW camp under those conditions. They were horrific. Your family didn't know if you were alive or dead. Of course, it affects a man's.
Okay, a while ago you described Devil Anse as being a banging rooster. What did you mean by that?
Well, that's what Uriah McCoy described him as, but I would agree. A banging rooster's a smaller version of a regular rooster, about a quarter or a half the size of a standard chicken. A banging rooster's smaller, more aggressive rooster.
Okay.
But they are easily hacked, and once they run from a fight, they will always run. It's just a proven fact.
Are you saying Devil Anse was a small man?
Oh yes, ma'am. He was a small statue of a fella, but he was a big talker.
Okay, how tall are you, Randall?
I'm 6 feet, but I'm not saying height makes a man. But in Ance's case, he sure talked a good talk. If he'd only backed it up when we were fighting for our lives and freedom in battle.
Let's move on. The wars are over, and what happened next?
Well, the wars ends, and I'm released from POW camp and return home. When I get home, I find that most of our livestock has been stolen.
Wow.
Along with anything else that had any value to it, such as tools and saddles. The family tells me it was the desperados from West Virginia that had made frequent raids over into Kentucky, acting as though they were Confederate unit, but nothing more than common thieves.
Wow, interesting. Did they know any of the thieves?
Of course.
Really?
Of course they knew him. It was Anse Hatfield and what had become known as the Hatfield gang. But they like to call themselves the Logan Wildcats.
Hey, after that, what happened next?
Well, they also tell me my brother Harmon was murdered by Devil Anse, Jim Vance, and the Hatfield gang, even after he had been discharged and was no longer serving in the war.
What is the Wildcats that you were talking about?
Yeah, that was Logan. The Wildcats was the 36th Virginia Infantry. That's where two of my brothers, they actually served in that unit. And it's funny how the 36th came up with that. We're given that name. They was in a battle with the Union, and they'd done good that day on the battlefield. And that night they were eating and sitting around the fire. And there was a couple other units that had joined in with them that day in that fight. One of those guys from another unit asked his buddy. His buddy had been fighting with the 36th. He was right there on line with them. And he asked his buddy, he said, how'd that 36th fight today? And my buddy said, 36 fought like a bunch of wildcats. And they were nicknamed. It wasn't an official name. They were just nicknamed the Wildcats. Later on, Devil Anse, after he deserted, he comes home and he's trying to save face. And he don't want to tell everybody he's a deserter, him and all them guys that ran. He tells them he's been sent home to be on a home guard, and he's with the Logan Wildcats. He starts his own make-believe group.
Oh, wow, I see.
And of course the people, they believed it.
Wow.
He went around robbing and stealing under this title of Logan Wildcats. but he didn't care who he stole from. I've talked to my neighbors. I've talked to people since I've been back home, and they say that Aunt stole from anybody.
Really?
West Virginia, Kentucky, Virginia. He took what he wanted.
And how did that affect you?
I guess you're talking about Asa Harmon being killed.
Yes, your brother. I'm sorry.
Yes. How would it affect you? How would it affect anybody knowing that someone had murdered their brother or another family member?
Okay. Did you take any action?
No, not me personally. Not then. I was just glad to be home. Wanted to get back to my family and my own life. Martha, Asa's wife, she wanted Aunts Hatfield and Jim Vance and the others charged with murder. But it never happened. Pike County Sheriff, he was a Hatfield. He was the first cousin to Aunts. He had Martha put her mark on a statement. He was going to help her get her pension. If Asa was killed in the line of duty, she could draw his pension. So they fixed up a paper that Asa was returning to his unit when he was killed. He wasn't returning to his unit. That unit had been disbanded, and he had a bullet in his hip.
Wow. What did you do, if anything?
Well, we tried to get our lives back in order, like they were before the war.
Okay.
Here I had been a POW camp, and Aunts Hatfield, he deserted and seemed to be stealing, killing, and getting away with it.
Wow. What happened next?
Well, then a couple of years later, in 1867, Aunts' brother Ellison Hatfield stole 4 pigs from Asa Peter McCoy, a relative of mine. Asa took them to court, and he and his cohorts had to pay Asa for the 4 hogs. Of course, that caused more hard feelings.
Okay. And then what happened after that?
Then again, in 1878, Floyd Hatfield stole one of my pigs.
Really?
Yeah, it was a sow pig. I didn't take the law into my own hands. I took him to court. Of course, this caused more hard feelings between the two families once again.
Wow. Okay. And then what?
Well, it was a couple of years later that Bill Staten, he was the only witness that stood up during the pig trial when I had hog stealing Floyd Hatfield in court. Well, he come home drunk one morning. He's coming through the woods taking a shortcut, and he runs up on Paris McCoy, nephew of mine. Paris was squirrel hunting, and he shoots Paris in the back.
Wow.
Bill Staten wasn't aware, or unbeknownst to him, that Sam McCoy was also out in those woods hunting. Sam, Big Sam, or squirrel hunting Sam, he shoots and kills Bill Staten.
Oh my goodness. And then what happened after that?
Well, a couple years later, 1880, at the election grounds, Rosanna, my daughter, and Aunt's son, John's, Hatfield got together and began a relationship with each other.
I see.
Told me she and John's were getting married. I forbidded it. She ran off to West Virginia to to Aunt's house to marry John's Hatfield. I wasn't happy about it.
I'm sure. And then what happened next?
Wasn't long after, two of my sons, Jim McCoy and Tolbert McCoy, they were both Pike County deputy sheriffs.
Okay.
And they had arrested John's Hatfield on moonshining, bootlegging, selling liquor without a license, whatever. They had warrants, and they arrested him on those warrants. They were within the law. They were lawmen. They had legal paperwork sent down from Pikeville, and they arrested him. After they arrested Johns and started to Pikeville with them, Ants and the Hatfield gang, desperados, villains, outlaws, whatever you want to call them, they bushwhacked my boys and took the prisoner, John's Hatfield, back to West Virginia with them.
Okay, can you tell me what happened next after that?
Well, now comes the fall election.
Okay.
August 1882 at Blackberry Creek. Ants Hatfield, Ellison Hatfield, Wall Hatfield, Elias Hatfield, West Virginia Elias.
Okay.
There was two Eliases back then, just like there was two Andersons and so forth. There was a good Elias and a bad Elias.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, several more West Virginia Hatfields showed up at the Kentucky election on Blackberry, wanting to influence the outcome of the election.
Really?
Yeah. Of course, they're all partaking of moonshine.
Yeah.
When a fight breaks out between Kentucky, Elias Hatfield, and Tolbert, my boy.
Okay. Continue, please.
I reckon Tolbert got the better of Kentucky, or bad Elias. And that's when Ellison Hatfield stood up, all liquored up, and said, "Why don't you try that on me, McCoy?" Two liquored up men, one challenging the other.
Wow.
You know what's going to happen if you're any kind of man at all. And the fight breaks out. The fight was on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, mind you, I guess me and Sarah had voted, done our business.
Okay.
We seen that the West Virginia Hatfields were present and accounted for. We didn't want no company with them, so we went back home. So all I know from there is what I was told. I was told that Ellison pulled his knife first.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Then Tolbert pulled his knife.
Mm-hmm.
From what I can understand, neither one of them had big knives. They were both just regular old fold-up pocket knives. Small blades on them.
Really? Okay.
And the word was that Ellison stabbed at Tolbert, but his knife closed on his hand and he dropped his knife. And then I was told the two men went to the ground wrestling. When Ellison got on top of Tolbert, he's hitting them in the face and jaws and head. And then he picks up a large rock. At the same time that Ellison's hitting Tolbert, Tolbert was on the bottom, but he continues to stab Ellison in the stomach and in his side. But he wasn't seeing much effect from the stabs, as he only had that little pocket knife. Knife was barely penetrating Ellison's skin with that little 2-inch blade. Ellison had now struck Tolbert several times with the rock to the face and head. That's what I was told from many people that was there and saw it. Palmer and William had both attempted to pull Ellison off of Tolbert. They just trying to get the fight to stop.
My goodness.
But he was bent on killing Tolbert. That's when Palmer shoots Ellison one time, trying to stop the fight. Stories have been told that my boys tried to run off, and that's not true. My boys have been taught never to run from the law.
Okay.
Always face your actions.
Good.
But they thought it was in self-defense. They didn't try to run. They thought they were justified. Why would they run? They had no reason to run. William hadn't done anything but tried to pull Ellison off.
Okay.
He hadn't even done nothing involving the fight.
Really? Okay.
Let me catch my breath.
Okay, take your time. Take your time.
The Hatfields grabbed the 3 McCoy boys. They grabbed Randall Jr. instead of William. But again, William had not assaulted anyone. He was just trying to separate the men. But they took Randall Jr. instead. Randall Jr. wasn't even there for the fight. He showed up after hearing the gunshot. And you know, a lot of people says that the boys took off running. They didn't run because they thought they were guilty. They stood around there, and then all of a sudden, from what they tell me, Goodlies from West Virginia. That's another one of Ance's brothers.
Oh, okay.
They said Goodlies pulled his pistol and started shooting at the boys.
Wow.
And that's when the boys started to take off. They wasn't running from the fight. They were running, trying to take cover.